Welcome to the Humans of Hospitality podcast with me, Mark Cribb. Now, there is a notable change in the air as the 4th of July approaches. Some operators are gung-ho and opening everything on day one, some are at least waiting until the Monday rather than the Saturday, and some are staggering openings over a couple of months, calmly learning as they go. Personally, with all of my venues near the beach in a tourism town, I'm going for it and I'm opening them all on the 4th and seeing what we can salvage from the 2020 summer. But we're going to need to be agile. So far, demand is decent, but far from overwhelming. We're filling the latter part of the weeks, but Monday and Tuesday that before we may have just carried from the profit-making days are not looking like they are worth opening for. So we'll start steady, but really hope to be up to full power for at least the 6 weeks of the normal school holidays. I will keep you posted as to how things develop. It's hard to fathom such a short season, but we'll stay agile, learn every day, and I will share with you any interesting observations. For now though, I have 2 more episodes recorded in the midst of lockdown before we start to shift to chatting to people getting the doors open. Today, I'm chatting to a true giant of the industry, David Sims, the Culinary Director at Restaurant Associates. Now, whilst to your average human, Restaurant Associates is not particularly a consumer-facing brand, you will certainly know many of the venues that David and his team operate, from Somerset House to Edinburgh Zoo to Michelin-starred restaurants like Jason Atherton's City Social and Michel Roux' Parliament Square. I chat about David's history in the podcast, so I'm not going to list it here, but fundamentally just be reassured that I was really excited to get to chat to David because I knew the diversity and depth of his experience across the hospitality sector, and I was right. He was an exceptional guest and really well informed about a wide variety of subjects, so you are in for a treat. We touch on things like chef development and training, the changes in kitchen culture, both positive and negative, and how to get the very best out of a brigade. David has some great advice about the complexity of reopening the doors, why to keep the offering simple, and some of the operational considerations of having less people to do tasks. That leads us on to the impact of supply and the need to be clever and efficient to stand any chance of making a post-COVID profit. David has some great thoughts on sustainability and the supply chain and our obligation as an industry to help to educate, but not to lecture the consumer on food, where it comes from and its environmental impact. We may even start a joint campaign to make eating strawberries in December a criminal offence. After a roller coaster of a chat with many highs and lows, we try to end positively around the nature of such a creative sector and where it may end up on the other side of the pandemic. Now, I hope you enjoy the conversation, and remember, before you do go, if you can support the podcast by heading over to the humansofhospitality.co.uk website and clicking on the big Patreon button, your support to keep this free podcast being produced would be exceptional. I promise to only spend the cash on the best kit and the best guests and represent an industry and of incredible humans that I utterly adore. If you listen regularly and can spare the odd fiver, that'll make you a lovely human too. Right, on with the show. Enjoy. David Sims, Restaurant Associates Culinary Director, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. Can I just ask, how are you and where are you in the world, please, David?
Hi, Mark. Thanks for inviting me. I'm currently in Essex at home.
Okay, nice. Home office, is that where you've been predominantly based for the last sort of few months? Because just to date this, we're still sort of tentatively in lockdown, I guess, certainly in our sector.
Yes, it's home office, not. Back room, yes. So I've got the both kids back from university and the wife all working from home. So yeah, I've been relegated to the back room, which isn't bad because it gets good sunlight and it's where the big TV is if I get bored. Not that.
Excellent.
But home for a while.
Yeah, nice. I've got younger kids and I have to chuck my son off his Xbox every time I do one of these just so that he doesn't completely spank the bandwidth. So he's rather, well, not necessarily grumpy. He's a bit more cheerful than my daughter who goes a little bit more problematic, but I think he's pretending to read a book. He's probably just downloaded something.
Excellent.
all good fun. So you've had a really impressive career. You've worked in some incredible restaurants as a chef, but you've also done some pretty diverse sort of positions, responsible for really broad range of hospitality businesses. So genuinely excited to get your perspectives on all sorts of things today, because just by the range that you've done, I'm sure you must be very well informed. But to set a little bit of background for people who don't know you or don't know the Restaurant Associates, can you just explain a little bit about what your role is at the moment and the sort of venues and operations that you're responsible for, please, David?
Yeah, absolutely. So Restaurant Associates is part of RA Group, which is another part of Compass Group, but we basically, it's broken into three different companies. Restaurant Associates, which caters for media companies, tech companies, financial institutes, etc. Then we have RA Venues, which is visitor attractions and cultural heritage sites, and then we have Rapport, which is our guest services department. So it's broken into three areas, and it's good. So I'm culinary director, so I head up pretty much all the food and hot beverage solutions for that business. We're international and national, so from South Coast all up to Scotland. We have a presence in New York, which is run by a subsidiary in the States. But literally, we do everything from a sandwich in a zoo to a Michelin-star meal, really. So quite a diverse bit of business.
Yeah, there can't be many jobs that cover that diversity. I mean, normally, if you're responsible for the food in a Michelin-star restaurant, that takes up about 140 hours a week. But you've managed to add hundreds of things to that. I take it you've got a pretty big team, have you?
Yeah, and they're excellent. Mark, they really are. It's they're a pleasure to work with, and they're all exceptionally well skilled. So multiple skill levels across the estate. But yeah, they're a great support function, and really really proud to have them on my side.
Yeah. So from a sort of consumer perspective, what would be the places or either the venues or the restaurants that people would know best?
So we have we're Whipsnade Zoo, HMS Belfast, Leeds Castle, Leeds Armoury, to name some of the Edinburgh Zoo, to see some of the visitor attractions, Hever Castle, and then for commercial restaurants, we're in partnership with Jason Atherton at City Social. We have Roux at Parliament Square with Michel Roux, and another partnership with Bryn Williams at Somerset House. And then obviously the corporates is a mixture of, as I say, private equity, media, tech, and legal and banks, etc. across the, prominently in the City of London, but again the larger cities across the UK, so Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds, Scotland. So really demographic split, really up and down the country.
My eyes are watering just imagining that. It sort of always blows my mind how these things run. I've got three restaurants and a little hotel within about 4 square miles of each other, and seem to manage to sort of run around stressed most of the time. And the scale of what you're talking about there is phenomenal. What does your average day look like then? Are you out on the road? Are you on the pass? Are you behind a laptop? How does it work?
Do you know what? It's a really good question, Mark. And every day is different, and that's what I think I enjoy about the role. There is no system to a point. Obviously, I'm not as hands-on as I used to be in the kitchen, but I love getting into the kitchen and being on the pass and stuff. That's more now for whether it's a large event or if it's a special dinner with either Michelle or Jason, or like a larger event at Wimbledon or something. I tend to get involved in those sort of things, or it's training and development is the other side. I get into the kitchen, really developing the group chefs and the kind of the group execs, and then the head chefs at sites, just from demos and training platforms. Outside of that, it's working with the sales team and the operation team and the finance team to ensure we're running a sharp and smart business, really. So whether that's engaging with clients, doing sales presentations, concept development, obviously, again, it's more managing the team to do the output, but continue to drive the business forward, really.
Yeah, and you're fairly unique in that sort of diversity of roles, I suppose, because there's not many chefs, I guess, that also happen to have been, the MD or at that sort of corporate level. But you're a proper chef. You're famously sort of known for starting with the Roux family, 3 years, I think, at Le Gavroche in the early days. What's your sort of most vivid memory, if you take yourself back that 20 odd years, whenever it was? What's your most sort of vivid memory of that part of your career in the kitchens?
That's so close to my heart. Learning, coming down to the London in the early 90s and working part of Roux restaurants, And then, the last 3 being at Le Gavroche were, they're such great teachers. They're so insightful, and they were tough kitchens to work in back then. I'm not going to lie about that. The hours were long, and there was a lot of pressure. But they really invested in people, and teaching people the importance of the ingredient, whether it's a broad bean or a truffle. The respect of that ingredient was a real key thing about teaching people how to cook the classical way and layering flavors. Balancing acidity and fat and all those things, which a lot of youngsters nowadays just don't seem to get that depth and breadth of training. So that stuck with me really, really well as a young kid. And I made a promise to myself I'd never ask someone to do something I don't know how to do myself, because I respected people who did that to me, and it really kind of sculptured my view of how to progress through the career.
Yeah. Any specific or particular chefs that sort of had the most influential impact on you over the years?
I'd say Michel Junior, just because again he was the first kind of real mentor I had, really. And I still, obviously now I'm back with RA, I still work very close with Michel, and I've been close to him throughout my career, really. And he's been there from personal support to industry support. As I've moved through my career, he's advised me on a number of occasions. So he's really been a real key part of my career.
Okay, nice. And I was quite relieved to hear, because as I said, I've got an 11 and 12-year-old, and I was watching something whereby you admitted to being quite a fussy eater when you were a kid, and my heart sort of leapt with joy, because as a restaurateur, I'm sort of always shockingly embarrassed by my kids' lack of appreciation of food. What age were you when you actually sort of, grew out of that? And please don't say 9.
I was horrific. I was such a fussy eater as a child. Good God. It was most probably not far shy of being 9. I'm not going to lie.
Oh God, damn! I'm too late. Yeah.
It was kind of, then maybe I wouldn't eat chicken. I wouldn't eat fish. I don't eat bacon. And then it wasn't until the first time I ate chicken was I was 9.5, 10. I was in Spain on holiday. I remember it vividly. First time I ate roast chicken, and then I just moved through. I didn't drink tea or coffee until I was 30.
30? Wow.
Yeah.
That's good for a chef. I thought chefs lived on espressos between 4 and 7 a.m.
I just it never connected with me. I didn't really like the bitter flavours of it, but I'm a massive addict of it now. So then maybe I went through my teens. I started getting a bit more adventurous and stuff, and then something clicked. I just fell in love with food. I always enjoyed baking with my mum. Really enjoyed baking as a mum as a young kid. And then, there's no going back really from that. So kind of 12-ish, maybe, really started a bit.
Okay, that's better. Well done for a minute. Thank you. I'll give my daughter one more year. I kind of worked out that my kids basically will only eat anything that they originally had between the ages of 1 and 3, because anything that they've not tried before, they're like, no, I don't like that. They drive me bonkers. But I think they just like winding me up because they know that I'm in the industry, basically. So was there a specific point? I suppose you were clearly interested, like you say, in baking and cooking, with your mum. But was there a specific point when you think, you know what, I'm actually going to make a career out of this? And do you remember when that was?
I had 2 passions. It was cooking, and I wanted to be. My father was in the Air Force, and I wanted to be a pilot. But he was very honest with me. He said, "Look, my eyesight wasn't good enough, and I need to deal with that and move on. Nowadays you can get laser surgery, but back then it was just not ever going to happen. So when I remember he was 14. I was 14 when he told me that. He sat me down and said, "Look, it's just not going to happen." So I was there, from that point. I was right. I'm going to be a cook, and just applied myself to that.
Amazing. That's a pretty good insight to have at such a young age, isn't it?
Yeah, no. As I say, it was the only 2 things that really interested me. I'm moving around the world with my dad in the RAF. I loved that. I loved the ethos of the military. I liked the regiment. The concise, precise elements of it, and just really kind of kindled to that. And then I also enjoyed cooking, but nothing else really excited me really. So I was dyslexic. I am dyslexic as a child, so I struggled at school in certain things because it wasn't really open back then. Kind of got taken the mickey out of quite a bit in some schools. It also didn't help that I was moving around every 2 years. with my parents living in the forces. So kind of just hands on. I really appreciated that sort of work and fell in love with it really.
Amazing. And then I guess, unusually, as I alluded to just now, for a chef, you also ended up in a couple of MD roles. Did you find the skills transferred? Because I guess, a lot of chefs are either, exceptionally practical and live life in the kitchen, and then there's an inevitability that's become more and more important to at least understand, the numbers and the GP, I suppose, and the business acumen, but not everybody takes that all the way to the MD level. How did you find that transition?
Again, quite natural. When I went through the Roux restaurants, and at the end of it, it was Roux Fine Dining was part of Compass back in the late '90s, and I don't think I would have been able to do it without the training and the system approach that something like a corporate company like that has. Very systematic, very it's there to learn if you want it. And again, my approach from an early age was I was never going to ask someone to do something I didn't know how to do myself. So I always made sure that I could understand something, and if I didn't know, I'd always ask and get the understanding. So I always went through that level, and the systematic approach of the large company really taught me so much, and it just enabled me to do what I did. But I loved the dynamic and the financial challenge of being an MD, and running the businesses with both Simon and Richard, who are phenomenal guys. It was a great part of my life, and I really am grateful for the ability to I did it.
Yeah, I think, to be fair, if you can manage a brigade of chefs, then everything else after that is probably easier. And managing a company, it's a comparative walk in the park. I think as a sector, we've chefs are renowned, I suppose, as being perhaps a more challenging aspect of being a restaurateur. Any advice to restaurateurs? You must have managed a phenomenal number of people and seen a phenomenal number of personalities, I'm guessing, from lots of different nationalities. What's the best way to kind of inspire, motivate, and manage a brigade in the kitchen, do you think?
For me, it's all about leading by example. Communication is key. Sometimes people, you've got to doubt yourself before you doubt others. Okay, is it my fault I've not communicated clearly? Have I not trained them enough? Have I not given them all the tools to do their job? It's too many people are too quick to blame others, and it's if you can lead by example and nurture and develop people, again, you're only as good as the people around you, right? So surround yourself with really, really good people, motivate them, communicate with them, and life becomes easy.
Just like that. just writing that down. I was just asking for a friend. Do you think that that culture in the kitchen has changed a lot? You've been in there for 20, 25 years, whatever it is. Do you think that is a genuine change? In kitchen culture.
Absolutely. Going back in the early days, kitchens were a closed book. Recipes were very secretive. Methods were secretive, and it was to learn anything you had to go on a stage. You weren't treated necessarily the best way, and that was tough, right? So it was tough. So to really get on, you really had to apply yourself and do long hours and do commit. Nowadays, with social media and the internet, literally, you can do 3 stages in a week without leaving your house. You as long as you've got the basic knowledge and understanding of seeing how someone is doing something, you can pick up things quite quickly. And as long as you apply that bandwidth to your brain, and you can review things quite simply. But it's certainly changed treatment of people. Working hours, which I think is the right move, and also the aggression. I'm so glad aggression's dying down in across most of the industry, because it's not the best way to get out of people, is it? So yeah, I think it's really changed over the years, and it's still got a long way to go. But now we're stuck with a different challenge, right? We're stuck with a challenge of some people who are more interested in staring at their phone, don't like to be given deadlines, want to turn up when they want to turn up. So it's shifted from one problem to another. But it's you just got to continually adapt, understand your workforce, and try and understand how to get the best out of them.
Mm. Yeah, it seems to be much more sense of entitlement, I think, doesn't there, with the younger chefs coming through, and this sort of thing of, I've done that section for 3 months, so I've nailed that, so I'd like to be sort of, CDP or sous chef now. Whereas, yeah,
Absolutely.
putting in a couple of years just on the sauce or on the meat doesn't seem, I don't know, seem to be less patient. Would that be a fair observation?
Yeah, absolutely. They are, they come in and they want to be a sous chef before they've done any groundwork. And it's like any art, okay? You've got to you learn by doing and repetition, and you learn by your mistakes, and it's by only doing that you can improve yourself and understanding, how to balance the sauce. People just sometimes don't think, and especially if they think putting 20 things on a plate is being really successful, and sometimes three things done exceptionally well will blow your mind. And it's about understanding how to create and plate flavors and handle food, and then ultimately handle people and make it financially viable. Really, so they
Yeah.
kind of want to jump before they can even forget the running piece. They want to jump before they can even crawl.
Yeah, and part of the issue that sort of made that was, and I agree absolutely, the culture needed to change, and I think there was a lot of chefs, I suppose, that have come through the industry that were, shouted at and worked in aggressive kitchens, and thank goodness they've sort of recognised that they didn't enjoy being managed that way back in the day, and now they're quite often in charge of kitchens and they're helping to change that culture. But there seemed to be a real shortage of chefs in the last few years. Is that something that you've experienced? I mean, clearly now it looks like it's probably going to flip the other way with the pandemic, which we'll come into shortly. But yeah, would you say there's been challenges in recruitment recently?
Yeah, absolutely. And then I kind of think it's been since the 2008 recession. There was a real hit. A lot of the Australians and Kiwis and Canadians were on 2-year visas. That shriveled up quite fast in that period. Never really came back. But again, it's really tough out there. Again, it's going back 25 years ago, you'd have to apply to 3, 4 restaurants and be on, when I was at Gavroche, it was an 18-month waiting list, 18 months to get into that place. And pretty much now, if you can write a nice email, polite email, you can walk into any kitchen if you've got the right attitude. And you want to commit yourself. You can get anywhere, any 2-star, 3-star, 1-star restaurant. So yeah, it's a really different approach, and it's not going to get any easier. So that's why I think it's really important you put time and effort into your team to really nurture and develop them and bring them up through the ranks.
Yeah. I was chatting to Peter Ducker from the Institute of Hospitality a couple of weeks ago, so episode 85 for anybody who wants to listen. But we were very much chatting about the kind of traditional college routes, I suppose, university routes of hospitality. And now that the colleges and unis are much more about making a profit, perhaps than necessarily educating people, and that hospitality, particularly kitchens, it's a lot of investment in kit and space and human beings, that they just... I don't know if it's supply or demand led, but there's certainly a drop in courses. What's your experience of that sort of, people coming up from college, and are you having to set up your own apprenticeships instead of? Can you just talk about your experience of that, I guess?
Yeah, I think there's less people going through college. Well, it seems that way, as you say. I've got some great connections at Westminster Kingsway, and we've also got our own apprenticeship scheme within the company, which is one of the key things I really wanted to focus on when I came back to RA was really build that and nurture it, because you've got to build some sort of future for the guys that are coming in. I've seen so many youngsters come in who've done college, come in and last 6 months in the industry, and then just go off and do something else because they've either been taught incorrectly and they don't realise what they're getting into. And then so getting the people you've got, trying to build a continual network of apprentices through the Westminster and our own accreditation system, so we can build them up from an apprentice into a commie, and then within 3 years we get them to a CDP process, and then even continue it further than that, because there's a gap, isn't there, from you become a CDP and you're running a section and you think, okay, I'm doing really well, then you get given a sous chef role, and you've then got to start writing rotas. You've got to start helping running the business, doing ordering and stuff. And you've got to manage more people, and then become a head chef, and you're responsible for P&L, sundries, all that sort of stuff. And no one's ever taught you how to do that. So it's we're looking at building a kind of degree level qualification, which we're working with a few people on, which will be really exciting. to give that next level of, financial knowledge, really from ground roots up, how to manage situations, how to deal with conflict, how to deal with all those things that you need in your toolkit to manage a business effectively. How to read people and, notice if people are struggling mentally, so you can be that guidance and support for them. How to interact with suppliers and, build an offer, be creative, because it's such a missing link of, you, as I recently said, you come up and then all of a sudden you're expected to know these things, which you just don't get taught.
Yeah, no, I feel for any chefs, and you sort of all too often see it, I suppose. People are basically promoted until the point, where they're the least competent person for that role, I suppose.
Yeah.
Is that something you've done here? Because you're absolutely right. It's such an exciting industry where, as you alluded to, you can be dyslexic. You don't need to be the most academic person at school. You can come into chefing, which everyone knows. People don't realise that you can become a director. Then become an MD of a company. That internal training that teaches you all those skills that you just mentioned, is that something you work with the local colleges or universities on, or is that something purely that you run in house?
It's a mixture of the two. So we've got a great L&D team. Which runs that, and also, working with colleges. Throughout my career, I've either linked to a college or of some description wherever I've been. I was lucky enough to be invited into the Royal Academy of Culinary Arts quite a few years back, and from a doctor school process to engaging with colleges to help support students, from giving them work experiences to develop them, to mentoring them. And then, doing things like the Annual Award of Excellence through the Academy, and again, nurturing people, and then pushing and get through to the Roux Scholarship and all those sort of things is really, really great. So building platforms, as I say, we're trying to build some, we've got our own, but working with colleges like Westminster and stuff, just really helpful to give you a broader spectrum. I'm also looking at doing some, with the levy, obviously the apprenticeship levy, there's thousands, hundreds of thousands of pounds just sitting there. So trying to work on creative solutions where we can support, certainly come out of COVID, support our bakery suppliers and our butchery and fishmongery suppliers, where we can, utilise their skill set to be part of an accreditation scheme where they can get funding from the government. We don't get anything apart from, interested and skilled chefs from the other end of it. So just continually trying to be creative, how we can develop our teams to continue to grow them and benefit everyone, really.
Yeah, it's good. I guess I mainly end up sort of chatting to the smaller scale independent sector, I guess, which is bit I get particularly excited and passionate about. But you have got an amazing opportunity with the number of chefs you've got and the resources and just the diversity of places, I suppose, that you can put people as part of their development. It is a great opportunity to make it a much more rounded career, I suppose, than a direct.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you give people something to, you can map out their journey for them, hopefully they're going to be more interested in sticking around with you, so you can continuously developing them. And whatever it is, you can only benefit from that, right? The business can only benefit from it, and so everyone wins.
Yeah, no, 100%. So moving on to the pandemic, obviously we're in the midst of restaurants and bars are still closed. Have you had anything open? Have you got any sort of takeaway outlets that have stayed open, or have you been completely shut down for the last few months?
So we're currently running about 4%.
Wow, 4% of revenue or 4% of venues?
Revenue.
Right.
So it's massively reduced. Literally, we've got a handful of sites which have stayed open due to, and we're some traders and some tech people who obviously have to work. It's minimal. But it's been good because there's been some really important people we've had to, some key workers we've supported and stuff. So it's great, but obviously much more reduced. We've been really focusing on the reopening piece and how we get around that.
Yeah, perfect. Well, that's kind of what I wanted to chat to you about today, really. So, like I say, I've got, a few venues and the complexity, they're all slightly different. I've got a little hotel, I've got a restaurant on a beach where it's pretty easy to do takeaway onto the sand. And I've got a place with a big terrace, and then I've got a place with much sort of lower ceilings and much more enclosed. The complexity of looking at each individual place, hurts my brain. But you've got a few hundred outlets to worry about. How are you getting on with planning reopening then, and what sort of challenges are you coming across?
You're right. We're lucky though. I've got a whole HSE team to help me guide me through and the team through that. So we've got your team around us. But the main thing is, you say, every building's different. It's got different issues. It's got a pillar here. It's got, the kitchen's only yay big. So there's you can't just do a one size fits all approach, which is obviously then makes the workload even harder. But it's just we try and break it down to small pieces, each piece at a time. So from a coffee perspective, we look at the layout of the counters and apply a simplistic approach to it. So you apply a single traffic designated task. So, you hand off the task to what you might have had 6 people behind that counter. Now you're only having 3. So the guy who's texturing the milk also does the coffee extraction and also does the individual unique piece. Do you want sugar or whatever else? Someone doing the till work, and then the third person's handing off. So you just change the skill set of the team and give them a flow diagram. Same with the kitchen space, changing, breaking up the sections per se. And, the guy who's on that section might have to do a garnish and something else and do a sauce because he can't move around the kitchen per se. So just challenge it in that way and really look from a floor plan perspective, work on flows, working on how we can split the structures of the team so we can have different shifts to enable the right people into the right spaces. But also then from the flow of the customers, it's how we adapt the food offer to do that. So in the casual environment, we're flipping to a click and collect model. So sandwiches, coffee, box salads, quite nutritional stuff. Obviously, massively reduced menu, so people can click and collect via an online platform. So we can reduce waste, we can work smarter, and give the consumers hopefully an offer that they want to have and they feel safe because they don't necessarily have to queue. It's the restaurants, the commercial restaurants where, like everyone else, we're going to, based on the 1 or 2 meter rules, we're going to struggle. So it's very difficult.
Yeah. So because all of that, or most of it certainly, maybe a little bit different in the QSR model, but some of the stuff you were talking about there has an inevitable impact on supply, not necessarily demand. But if you've gone from 6 people behind the counter to 3 or 6 in the kitchen to 3, you clearly can't make and produce as much stuff. How can you make? We had a reputation as running on exceptionally tight margins, particularly in the last couple of years. What's your thoughts around actually the viability of that from a commercial perspective?
Yeah, again, it's a real tricky question, isn't it? You've just got to be smarter. I mean, obviously the menu needs to be reduced. You've got to make sure your menu's the right menu, so you've got the right offer to people. And then, in one way, you should be more efficient because you're being more. You're not doing so many things, so you've got less chance of wastage. You've got less production, so your labour team can be leaner. You just got to look at yourselves and control your production really. But it's the unknown. It's the moment where some of our buildings in the Wharf are sitting around 10%. We might get up to 30% by September, maybe 50% by December. So it really it's so different to the norm. You've got to be able to, as I said earlier, be really agile to adapt to as those things come in and the volumes start creeping up. How you can either expand your offer to maintain the continuity and interest for your customer base, but without overstretching it, so you become wasteful and unproductive.
Yeah, it's going to rely on a much more sort of understanding consumer, I guess. And I was chatting to Geising Watson from Riverford Organics a few weeks ago. I don't know if you know them, but they're sort of box delivery company basically. And they'd introduced a huge amount of complexity due to sort of consumer demand over the years. So you could tweak your boxes, you could add things, change the day a week you got delivery, and they got absolutely swamped. During the lockdowns, everybody wanted their food delivered, and he was actually pretty excited about the opportunity to go back. The only way that he could cope with demand was to take away all of that choice, which is what he wanted to do originally anyways. He wanted people to follow the seasons, and he wants you to get what you're given. You get a box of food through the door that's bang on what's in season, and get rid of all that choice. It sounds like it's going to be a little bit the same in restaurants. We've been looking at our menus and yes, simplifying them so that you can have less staff and less waste. Do you think the consumer's got any idea of the sort of new hospitality world they're going to go into, and do you think they're going to be patient?
Do you know what I think? I think they will, but I hope they will. I think it's been really interesting to see, seeing people just have had to adapt their lives already. Right, you go out, you never used to see people sitting on a green, since, before, social distancing is slightly relaxed over the last couple of weeks. I never used to see people sat on the green near my house, with their kids and on a blanket and stuff. They've adapted their lives, and I think everyone's had to go through that. So I think hopefully they will. Whereas I think if there's pockets of people doing different things, they might have been less forgiving. So hopefully they'll understand. But you're right. I mean, the demand from the consumer in the past was, I want it slightly different. I want it that way. I want it this way. I want that. And then you had all the dietaries and all the fads and the allergens, and you had to really scale things up. And hopefully, simplicity will just come, and consumers will appreciate and not take for granted what they've not been having for 13, 14, 16 weeks, whatever it is, by the time we get back to normality. So I really hope they do, and then they understand. And to part of me thinks they will.
Yeah, well, same. I think we hope, because in many ways there's some advantages around that, isn't there? So yeah, it'd be nice. Same with opening hours and stuff. I suppose. I don't know. I just feel like, and this might be down to rents and the economies of restaurants, but we've seen tighter margins. So I think we've just sort of we've put more and more stuff in so that we're still attractive to the consumer. We've opened more and more hours, but we almost make it harder, more complex. Margins go down, profitability goes down. But one of the big things is that landlords feel they can charge more because restaurants are generally take the most money in any kind of development or unit. I know rents is a big issue across the sector. What's your thoughts around that, and what's your experience with landlords at the moment? Are they engaging?
Mixed. I mean, luckily I've not had to have many conversations with landlords per se, because we're normally in other tenanted buildings. But it's speaking to friends and colleagues in the industry, it's mixed. It's really mixed. Some are being very supportive, and some not so, which I think is quite short-sighted. Because what do they want? An empty building at the end of the day where they've still got to pay rates on. I think, again, there's so many different spins on this, Mark. I think, I hope, again, I'm there to help my friends wherever I can and stuff, but I know that some of them have had some really tough conversations, and it's really brutal. And as you say, I think where businesses have had to grow and grow and grow and adapt, and the offer just expands. Again, as that just erodes your margin. So hopefully, coming back, and people will be a bit more efficient, because people will understand. And landlords, again, seeing, going back to the 2008 recession, when the 5-year deals ended in 2013, there was then rent release and everything else, because they wanted to maintain tenants and etc. But then in 2018, when those extensions came out, there was massive hits from landlords. I remember in the West End where landlords were trying to double rents back then, just because they'd never really recovered from the 2008 recession. And I just hope they've learned from that. And, where they ended up having empty spaces, like you see on the high street, there's so many empty retail spaces where they just can't get the people in because the rates are too big. So hopefully, Mark, people will understand, listen, from a landlord perspective, and not be greedy. I hope, industry's going to struggle.
There's a lot of hopes there. My finance director doesn't let me use the word hope, unfortunately. hope's not enough, apparently. So if he listens to this, he'll chuckle. You know a lot of people in the industry. You're obviously speaking to a lot of people. Do you think we've seen a lot more CVAs or worse sort of people going pop already, particularly I suppose in the last week, where we've still got this unclear kind of opening date? Is your feeling that most people are going to find a way through this, or do you think we're on the brink of a potential sort of tsunami of places either opening for a short period of time or not opening at all? What's the sort of general vibe you're getting from chatting to people?
I think we're at the tip of a wave. I think it's about to crash, potentially. Either some will hopefully ride it out, and the others will crash and burn. I think obviously cash flow is really important to people, right? And it's depending on how they've managed to deal with their business over the closure, whether they've managed to clear the debt, creditors off and stuff like that. I think with the uncertainty around the date opening and the 2-meter rule, also, the furlough scheme, there's not many restaurateurs I know that be able to, fund, even the NI and pension piece, let alone 10% of a wage of a member of staff if they've got no revenue. I can't say anyone can do that. So I think it's really tough, and I think we're in a, use your terminology on a tsunami. It's going to potentially flood very quickly if people don't make the decisions sooner rather than later, which is a real shame. It's a real shame because look at Brett at the Ledbury. I mean, it's devastating. That poor guy can't. His space doesn't allow him to do that, and that's a phenomenal restaurant. So he just can't open up with 2 meters. He couldn't even open up with 1 meter. But it's a different issue, right? But again, it's with the Labour challenge and everything else. I think we've got, certainly over the next 2 weeks, as we flip into July, when people will start. We've got 30 days till the end of July. I think we're going to see a few more, unfortunately.
Do you think the government get it? I mean, it seems odd that we have had no real sort of movement and response. All we've been told is, not before the 4th of July, not before the 4th of July. And we're kind of all like, look, particularly in the hotel sector, you can't, tell hotel guests that they can come on the 4th of July and expect them to come on the 4th of July. People book ahead for these kind of things. Do you think there's a lack of comprehension, or what's your thoughts on, why the government doesn't seem to be giving clarity at the moment?
Yeah, I've got some strong views on this. I think it's really bizarre. I think, I found it very confusing that they said they gave us 2 weeks' notice or 10 days' notice that we had to wear face coverings on trains and tubes. Why not implement it straight away? Why are they giving us any guidance, as you say, to the 4th of July? It's very, very peculiar. I don't understand it. And I think they can do more for us. I think they've done a great job. I'm not saying that, but there's countries like Germany who've dropped their VAT rate for a whole calendar year to help support the hospitality industry. We could do something similar. Where just free up more cash flow within your business, so you can, because none of us could put our prices up, right? Not and encourage people back into the business. So I think there is more the government can do, and I think communication is got to be improved from, to educate people, how safe it will be or how it won't be safe, but also so businesses can really set up and try and get back to normality. They seem to do it they did it with the open air markets, they did it with retail, but I don't know why they're not doing it with hospitality. I'm really confused.
Yeah. It's become increasingly confusing. I think, you look over towards France, and, the French, I suppose, are, renowned for Culinary, and they clearly recognise, that restaurants, cafe culture, espressos in the square is sort of the fabric of society. And you sort of felt like that had changed in the last sort of 20 years here, and we'd become much more sort of known for our incredible restaurants, some of the best restaurants in the world. But this has made me worry a little bit about, do they appreciate that, just from a placemaking perspective, the point of being on planet Earth, where you want to live, you want to move into the parts of the town or the city or the coast with nice bars and restaurants, and we get taxed a phenomenal amount. I think it's something like £38 billion a year that hospitality pays into the coffers. We've got rates on beer and sort of taxes on wine and spirits and all this kind of stuff. So it feels like we give an incredible amount. And I was hoping with UK hospitality coming out and saying, clearly a message to the public, we're the third biggest employer in the country. We employ 3.5 million people. It felt like we were getting some momentum and some recognition, but I can't help but feel that that's ground to a halt a little bit.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's mad. It's absolutely mad. And I don't understand it. As you say, it's such a key part of society. It creates so much income. It creates so many jobs. It's a massive part of the world and culturally of this country. And I don't get it when they're clearly communicating about other industries, and I just don't know why they're not doing it for us, because there is what they could do. As I say, with relief, whether it's there's multiple things.
Indeed. And we can clearly help the high street. I sympathise for retail and the move online, but you can't really do, apart from delivery, obviously, you can't do food and drink online. So we can help. If you bring more people to living in town centres and you create, more of a cafe culture, we can do a lot for a town centre. But it just feels like we need a little bit of support. Well, although the hospitality sector has been getting at least increased sort of recognition, I guess, we hear less about the suppliers, much more about the operators. What's your experience with the supply chain? How are they getting on, the sort of people you speak to, and any sort of specific examples, I suppose, of people that have been impacted further up the chain?
Yeah, again, there's been some great guys go under, unfortunately, who just can't reopen for multiple reasons. But again, there's some guys who have been able to just mothball because it fits their model. Like some great fish guys down on the south coast. But for me, I think we're going to have, certainly on the specialty gear. There's going to be a gap whenever we reopen because it's about you start I was speaking to our butcher yesterday. They reopened yesterday, as in got staff back, not to start selling, but to start, getting some animals to slaughter, so we start dry aging them. Looking at trying to get forecasting on volumes, so they're kind of ready for the fourth, at some level. But again, there's all the crops which were harvested, weren't harvested, that were planted, so they went into specialty stuff, and then you're going to have that gap again where if you're not rotating your crops fast enough, you're going to miss out. And then you've had the weather yield issues and supermarket issues. So it's going to come and bite us, I think. Especially cheese production, all those things that are kind of stopped. Even coffee. With the harvesters in Brazil, I was talking to a friend last week, and in Brazil they were kind of fine, and they were just coming into the harvest season, and they hadn't had a case. And literally the Friday before they were supposed to start the harvesting, they got their first case, and then the local villages put barriers up. They weren't letting anyone in, let alone the government. They didn't want to get caught. So then they'd basically destroy the whole of their first coffee harvest, which would be criminal. They'd just go under. So I think there's different pockets of different specialty people. I think obviously the core stuff has been grown because supermarkets and stuff have carried on. It's the specialty stuff, I think, which is going to impact, and we'll have a gap again when we reopen.
Yeah, crazy, isn't it? We can't run out of coffee. Oh, God, I can't survive. Do you think, in general, even excluding COVID, I suppose, what's your thoughts on the supply chain and how close restaurants can get? Because do you think chefs are getting better or worse? It feels like society in general is getting worse at sort of understanding where food comes from, and we just go to the supermarkets. And I've had chefs before that care predominantly just about how the food tastes and not necessarily where it comes from and the provenance and the ethics behind it. Do you have a feel for the sort of the general movement, I suppose, within the industry, and are we getting closer or further away from our supply chain?
Mixed in different sectors of the business, really. I think top end people are getting closer to the commodity and being more focused on how it's grown in the variety and in the, certainly from look at the depleting fish levels and stuff like that. So I think it's the awareness is increasing, but it's the mass production of stuff which I think is destroying the planet. And speaking out of turn or not, it's the supermarkets that need to be held accountable for that. The war on plastics, but they still wrap a cucumber in plastic. Why? So I think I'd love to get to the stage where seasonality is driven by demand, but it won't be. People still want to eat strawberries in December, which is criminal, really. But I think educating people and from the young age, for me is the important part of that. But the fact of the matter is, right, we have to change the way we eat as a planet because we can't sustain it. By 2050, we've got to be down to less than 8% of our daily intake of animal protein. It's crazy because so we've got to do it in a way of not preaching to people, but hopefully educating people so they can be aware of it and hold the large corporate businesses to accountable, like supermarkets for battery chickens and all the things that shouldn't be done.
Yeah, I actually liked it when you said it should be criminal to eat strawberries in December. That'd be quite a good way of resolving it. If that was, I don't know if that's a genuine proposal, David.
I might table it, but but again, it goes back to the question we touched on earlier about demand, right? If we removed it from the shelves, it would go back. It would, people would, sorry, we can't grow it. You're not having it. So I think it'd be some really ballsy move by someone to do that. I think it'd help massively, enabling crop rotation and all that stuff. So the planet is, we're looking protecting it for the future. I think it's really important, and it's good to see some top end guys really focusing on that. Really importantly.
Yeah. I feel that, it should be our moral responsibility, really. I think in the same way that you expect an airline pilot, to know more about flying a plane than you do, I think if you work in kitchens and restaurants and around food, there's an inevitability that we should know more about where food comes from, the monocultures, the effect on farming. But it's such a big challenge. I don't know how we get the consumer to care more. I go through periods of optimism where I think it's changing, and I get excited, and I think we're hopefully moving. It was one of the reasons for launching this podcast, was to take people sort of subconscious to conscious decision making. But then when I see the queues outside all of the national sort of fast food chains in the last 10 days, where people will queue for 2 hours for something shit, I get depressed again and think maybe we're not making any progress. It's a frustration. We have a responsibility as an industry to try and help this, I guess.
Yeah, and it's the tricky one, isn't it? As I said, it's about how you educate someone without preaching to them, and it's awareness. And for me, it's getting youngsters really getting hold of them at a young age, because they're the people who are going to make those decisions as they grow up, right? And the 10-year-olds now in 10 years are going to be buying their own things. It's terrible. You're right. We should be held accountable for it. We are the gatekeepers of every industry and every business we run. It's down to us to control that, and we should absolutely take pride in it.
Yeah, it's a real challenge, because consumers don't want to hear about that at the point that they're sat in a restaurant, 7:30 on a Friday night. They just want a treat, and they want a nice bottle of wine, and they don't want to be lectured, and they don't want to be educated. They just want to enjoy themselves. But I can't help feel that as a sector, we need some sort of movement or body or support that just works closer with suppliers. I feel for the farmers, it just looks like they get constantly pushed for produce more and produce it cheaper, and I guess it has to come from government. Hopefully, Henry Dimbleby has been working on this, isn't he? Looking at the sort of the supply chain, and I don't know where he's got to, but hopefully some change is coming.
Yeah, I mean, we did a nice thing last year. We speaking to one of our suppliers, Lake District Farmers. They've got a great rare breed pork farmer. Her name's Robin, and we committed to taking all of her pigs every year. Just so, she's got phenomenal Berkshire pork, and it's a royal bloodline, two royal bloodline animals, and it's we committed to taking all her pork from her, so she could stay producing. It's just simple things like that. It's only like 80 pigs a year. It's not like it's huge, but it's a way we can utilize to support a really good producer like that from Cumbria. And we can use it from everything to dry aging it for the top end restaurants, or teaching youngsters how to break down the back end of a pig and using slow roasting the legs and stuff. So, it's stuff like that where you can really help and support the producers, because they get treated hard, right? With government subsidies and everything else. It's just so difficult for them to maintain the standards.
Yeah, well, the key thing, it seems to be in farming, is that we need to agree prices in advance and just not have this market volatility, because it's an impossible position that they're in, where they're producing a product having no idea what the sale price for that product is going to be at the end of production. So they don't know how much they can invest in land, how much they can invest in feed and the quality of that feed and what they're doing, because they don't know what they're selling the item for. So I think we just need to commit earlier on to, we will buy your product at this price as long as it meets these kind of criteria. But the supermarkets is almost like, well, the price has dropped. This is the latest development. This is what's happening in the international market, and therefore we're going to pay you 25% less than we agreed we would. That's got to be an impossible scenario. It'd be like us opening, wouldn't it, on a Friday night, and then changing the price to 2/3 of the way through the evening because demand dropped in China or something. It must be bonkers.
Yeah.
It must drive them bonkers.
Yeah. And again, it goes down to supermarkets. They control so much of that. They put so much pressure on producers, don't they?
Yeah. Hugely. It's interesting you mentioned meat earlier. So your thoughts, then, we've seen, and it was probably a frustration of the sector maybe a couple of years ago, and you mentioned sort of fad diets as well, but hopefully there's a difference. This sort of growth around vegan and plant-based, it feels for the first time that this isn't a fad, perhaps. There seems to be a sort of, a genuine kind of prolonged growth, I suppose, in this area. Would that be a reflection of your experience as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, again, it's certainly something that's just sticking around, and I'm glad it's, so I don't highly regard fad diets much at all. Everyone's personal body's different. I react differently to you, to everyone else. Some people can tolerate gluten, some people can't. So the diets don't necessarily work, but I think it's important. Again, for me, it's about awareness, and it's not to jump on the bandwagon. Oh, I'm a vegan, I'm a vegetarian. It's about reducing the quality of animal protein you're eating, but increasing the quality of it so you can eat less of it, and then balance out your diet with great wholesome vegetables. Which why wouldn't you want to do that? I mean, it's so again, it comes down to how you produce it, how you cook it, and the consumers sometimes, unfortunately, don't understand that a really good dish doesn't mean without protein on it doesn't mean it's going to be cheaper to produce.
Yeah, no, quite often the opposite. You think of the work that goes into a really good quality sort of plant-based burger compared to a beef burger, and it's much more complex to do the plant version, isn't it?
I mean, it's again, it's how you drive that awareness and break the norm. You don't need to eat 200 grams of chicken at lunchtime. There's enough protein from chickpeas and nutrient-dense greens like kales and brassicas, etc. So it's about just again being creative and delivering that really exciting food offer that delivers on that point and message.
Okay. One of the other big sort of trends, I guess, that we were seeing before the pandemic, but it's only been sort of 10x multiplied during it, is this sort of thing around delivery, and the likes of Deliveroo and Uber and all these guys, which probably originally came about with this sort of desire to try and deliver sort of restaurant quality food to your home. But I think quite quickly Restauranteur said, look, you can't put our style of food on the back of a motorbike and drive it 3 miles and expect it to come out like it does in a restaurant. But lots of people were sort of feeling they needed to dabble into it. Really tricky to prove if it was any actually viable or worth doing because of the cut that these companies take. But now, more and more people, and maybe the growth of things like Netflix and Amazon, and there's more to do at home, so people are less bored. So it looked like a challenging time for the sector anyway, with this shift to home eating. What's your experience been? Have you dabbled with any of these companies, or has that not been sort of relevant in your sector yet?
There's been a kind of a test bed done with it, very early stages for certain parts of the business, which it's relevant to. But again, I don't think it's going to go away. Again, it's people, are all time poor, right? So they act on and use their mobile devices to create the need for food and whatever else. I mean, the stories I've heard of some some people delivering what they've had delivered is quite hilarious. But it's there, and I think you can be smart with it. I think if you put the right offer in, you can expand your revenue lines quite significantly. But you've got to put the right products in. And make it relevant. Otherwise, you're barking up the wrong tree.
Yeah. Okay. And then advice to anybody out there, whether it's running a QSR or a restaurant. As you've said, you've spent a lot of time looking into this. You've got an HSE team behind you. Any advice that you would give to people who are looking towards the 4th of July and looking towards reopening? What sort of things do you think they need to focus on to open successfully?
Clearly, the offer. The size and scale of it and the complexity behind it, with the knowledge of the team size they can have, because the footprint of the building is going to dictate how many staff they can have, including customers. So really focus on that. Really communicate to your team, make them feel safe, make them feel they understand everything that's going on. Because nobody likes change, right? It's the biggest thing everyone hates, but we're going through a lot of it right now. And then just focus on providing the product that you think your customers want. Rely on what you know best, and just be prepared to be agile, I guess.
Yeah, I think agility is key, isn't it? We're all pivoting and learning on the hoof. How many of your places are you aiming at opening? Everything on the 4th, anything on the 4th, or are you sort of staggering, opening a few, learning a bit, and then opening the rest? What's the current strategy?
We're literally slowly. So we're opening a few things, gauging the market. Certainly more on the casual element first. Coffee, bakery kind of things to see the interaction from customers. Plans to open the restaurants just because where they're positioned. One in Parliament Square and one in the Square Mile. Doesn't make any sense just to do that really before September, based on current forecasts of returning people into the city. But that's every day we review that. If things open up well on the 4th of July, we're in a position that we could bring things early if needed to be. Likewise, if not, then we push it back. What we do need to know is we we've got to know the volumes of people we can get into our business before it becomes viable. So, looking at September for the top end restaurants, really.
Yeah, it's an interesting difference, I think, isn't it, between being allowed to be open, but being, viably being able to open, and they're two very different things.
Yeah, and again, with the even the venues that are opening up, some of the internal spaces aren't allowed open, so it's only the grounds that are open. So you can't really, you might be able to put, one of our little artisan coffee trikes somewhere, but outside of that, you can't really do anything else until more internal spaces are opened up. But it's interesting, as you say, that from an events perspective, everything's been postponed. Again, we don't know about the distancing requirements, so how do we tackle events? Because there's still inquiries coming in, which is, I think, is positive, and it's a really great thing that we're getting inquiries, for kind of the last quarter of the year and stuff, which for me is a real positive thing that people are open to that suggestion. But again, it's how you cope with those, what used to be an event for 200 people, how does that look? And we're not able to define that until we know more about the social distancing.
Yeah, it's tricky, I think, isn't it? Hospitality is all about the energy in the room and the buzz and the vibe and the smiles and the eye contact. And it's hard to imagine everybody sort of, separated, standing apart, visors and screens. And I don't know, you'd just stay at home, really, wouldn't you?
Well, yeah, because, food and drink is it's so social, isn't it? It just, it creates conversation, it interacts. That's the whole part of it, really, isn't it? So I think, it's going to be really interesting times ahead. And I think there'll be some great lessons to be learned, which will make us all stronger. But I think it's going to be a real challenge getting there.
Yeah. Well, you sound like a half full kind of guy, overall, despite the challenges and like we said, this potential tsunami and the sadness, I suppose, of the impact on the industry. Do you see some positives coming out of it as well? And are you generally sort of fairly upbeat of at least a bounce back at some point, albeit the precise timings of that unknown?
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to, right? I mean, it's really important that you've just got to ride the storm and keep at the top of it. Otherwise, you get sucked into it and you'll just not come out. So, I think if you can, as long as you can open your brain and from a thought perspective and view things differently and be prepared to adapt, then why can't you succeed? Things will have to change. Then just accept that and just think of the best way you can do it. In my view.
Agreed. Yeah, it's certainly not boring, is it? We're all sort of kept on our toes and learning fast. Look, I'm conscious of time, and as I knew, I wanted to talk about a number of topics with you because you've got a superb amount of knowledge. Are there any other burning issues, David, that you came on really wanting to chat about?
No, it's been really great, Mark. Thank you so much for the invite. It's been great to talk to you, and really insightful. Thank you.
Good. No, thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time out. It's hugely appreciated. And keep in touch. And one day, hopefully, I'm in London on a fairly reasonable, frequent basis, or at least I was. So I'll pop in and join you for a beer in a venue. But for now, where should people go? Where's the best place for them to either follow Restaurant Associates or perhaps you personally? Is there a particular social channel you use more, David?
I'm on Instagram and Twitter. But yeah, and then when you come back into London, any of the cultural sites or the Somerset House, we'll have the summer series on, hopefully, potentially, or City Social or at Parliament Square. Come along and have something to eat.
Yeah, perfect. All right, great. Well, I'll put some links up on the show notes with this episode when it goes out as well to your pages. But for now, David, thank you so much. Good luck getting reopened, and thanks again for sparing the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. Much appreciated.
So did that episode deliver for you? A big thanks again to David for sparing me so much time and patiently allowing me to quiz him on such a broad range of topics. I love to chat to people as informed and experienced as David, since they have so many exceptional insights. If you enjoyed the show as much as I did, could you please do me a very quick favour? It'll take less than 30 seconds, which is pretty good input from you for the last hour of chat. I hope you will agree. Please just pick up the device you are listening on, open up the podcast app you are using, and find the bit to leave a review for this show. Click on 5 stars, or even better, leave a few words of encouragement. It really helps the algorithm spread the listenership of the podcast, and that really helps me out. Thank you so much. I will be back on Saturday morning with another super lively interview from Andrea from Mercato Metropolitano. And after that, I have a few shows I've patiently been waiting to release from pre-lockdown. More on that next week. Thank you.